Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is now 7 p.m. and we are live online.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be back. Our clock still says it's not quite 7, but it is. So let's get started. For those thinking it's a formal council meeting, it's not. This is our workshop. And we'll do our prep for the next meeting, which is next Monday. And let's just see who's here. I see a full house. I see Molly, Jeff, Amber, Lee, Paloma, George, and Pam. I see the city administrator, Chris White. I believe, Nick, you're online.
I am. Good evening.
And Natalie, I believe you're online. Maybe.
Natalie hasn't joined us yet.
Okay.
I'll let her know we're starting.
And then our assessor is going to be here in person or online?
She'll be in person at 7:30.
Okay, great.
So if we need to, we can jump to things. Oh, Natalie is on. Hi, Natalie.
Hello. Good evening.
Hey, thanks for joining. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the zoning changes regarding drive-through facilities and self-storage businesses. I leave it to Natalie or Nick for you all to figure out how do you introduce it to us and what do we got to cover.
I'm happy to jump in unless, Nick, you had anything else.
No, why don't you start us off? Thank you.
Okay. So following the April 14th meeting workshop, there were some changes or requests made about revising the proposed local law with regards to self-storage. So no changes have been made to the proposed local law with regards to the drive-through facilities. But we did make a few changes based on the comments from the council. For self-storage, right now self-storage is permitted in the LI, the HI, and the GB district. In the previous proposed version of the local law, we had it prohibited in all those districts. And based on the comments of the last meeting, we changed that to a special permit use. So now the use that is currently permitted in HI, LI, and GB is permitted by special permit in those districts. Also, based on some comments that we got from commenters, I guess, to the board, we did realize that self-storage and the other use of warehouse storage are similar in terms of how the council is considering self-storage, in terms of its impacts on pedestrian activity, active store frontages, employment. So we did actually also make a decision to group self-storage facilities and warehouse storage together so that they can both be subject to the proposed regulations that I'll get into on the next bullet point of my memo. And then, so based on the comments from the council, I think the idea discussed at the last meeting is, okay, maybe we don't want to prohibit self-storage everywhere. There are some existing self-storage facilities that do serve a purpose for the community, but what we want to do is kind of have them not fronting on our major roadways. So we added a section, since now it is a special permit use. In the use table, we kind of referenced a new section of the code, which would be 223-24.5, and within there created some locational restrictions with regards to self-storage. So based on the intent kind of voiced by the council that they not be fronting on these major roadways like Fishkill Avenue or Main or West Main, we added one regulation prohibiting frontage, which states that self-storage facilities and warehouse storage shall not be located along the frontage line of any lot with frontage on a public right-of-way. And so the frontage line is a defined term. It's the portion of the property, obviously, against the front property line where you would have your front yard setback. And I think this is something for discussion with the council tonight, because I think we had named a few roadways in the last conversation, but I wasn't quite clear where exactly we wanted to go with this, all roadways or just some specific. So you'll see in my memo that I did kind of outline, and I actually have just spent the last few minutes kind of highlighting the zoning map if it's helpful for me to show the streets that parcels within the LI, HI, and GB front on. So those include kind of Fishkill Avenue, Tyranda, East Main, Front Street, Beekman Street, Dennings Avenue, South Ave, River Street, Herbert, and Judson. So, you know, I went the route of just saying, or we went the route of writing the local legislation so that they are prohibited on any street frontage. But that can be a point of discussion with the council tonight if we want to include some streets, but maybe not all of them. And then additionally, for location requirements, so in addition to that kind of blanket statement, not on the front property line of any public right-of-way, you know, so we could allow many of these parcels are kind of, like I said, on these major roadways. So to allow them to still be on the site, just not in the front portion of the site, we recommended the following language: that self-storage facilities and warehouse storage shall be located behind active ground floor permitted uses, below grade, or in a separate secondary structure that is set back a minimum of 10 feet from the primary structure with frontage on the public right-of-way. So again, you know, there's some larger parcels in the HI and LI district specifically. So to allow self-storage uses to still be there, but maybe be a secondary use, that's why we add that last requirement, right? So the front-facing use would still be one of the permitted active uses in those districts, but self-storage and warehouse would kind of either be set back below or in a secondary structure. So those are the changes that we've made based on the comments at the last council meeting or workshop, and happy to answer any questions if folks have them.
Natalie, with your description of it, and thank you very much for going over it, can you confirm if the current self-storage, which I believe is on Front Street, if that would, how the law is currently written, would become existing non-conforming under the current proposal? I think it
The
fronts
project on
Front Street.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that. I'm not, that site plan was approved before I came in, so I know it's in a structure, and I believe it is fronting, it's on the side portion of the building, fronting on Front Street. So I think it would be non-complying in terms of dimensional requirements, right? It's still conforming in terms of use, like the use is permitted to be there, but it would be non-complying in that it would not be meeting these, the setback requirements. But Nick, if you're more familiar with that parcel or that approval, welcome comment there.
Thank you, Ned. I'm not familiar enough to comment on, other than say you are correct, right? The use itself is not conforming. It would just be whether it complies with the dimensional requirements. But I don't recall the specifics of that site plan.
That's fine.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think the way the code is written right now, permitted to continue its use as it is approved. I think what would be prevented under the new legislation would be any expansion of that along the front property line. Or if it was to, something was to happen, it was to go away, then it would have to be relocated somewhere else on the site.
Thank you. And as a general comment, I've gotten a couple of questions and I think confusions from the public about whether or not we're taking up all 4 of the recommendations from the Fishkill Avenue Concept Committee, especially the ones related to auto use generally. And I'm wondering if you can help clarify what we are and are not taking up with this current proposal.
I apologize. I did want to start a little bit kind of further back on that. So, you know, both of these, both the self-storage and the drive-through facilities were, came from initial recommendations from the Fishkill Avenue Committee. There was, I believe, 4 or 5 zoning recommendations and then some non-zoning recommendations within that. And the ones that the council decided to pick up and discuss are just the drive-through facilities and self-storage facilities. I think the remainder of those the remainder of those recommendations are not being moved forward at this time. And I think, as the council knows, or the public should know, is the Fishkill Avenue Committee is working on making their kind of final revised recommendations that they hope to get out. I know we hope to get those out in June. So there's potential revisions coming forward with that. And I think that would be a time that the council could consider the recommendations that were previously forwarded, as well as a number of additional recommendations that have been added by the committee.
Thank you.
If we prohibit frontage on all streets as opposed to just the properties that are listed here, during the special use permit, does the planning board have the ability to grant frontage on a street if during that process? Does that make sense?
So right now it's all streets. That's how it's listed, right? It's all streets in the code. If I believe typically something like that, a deviation, if we were to say no frontage on specific streets and then somebody wanted to have frontage on one of those streets, I believe that would be something that would be taken to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance of the locational requirements. So I don't know, unless you write that into the code, I've seen, you can kind of write flexibility as long as you're putting kind of criteria in there in terms of what the planning board should be looking at when deviating. But typically something like that deviation from the code would go to the ZBA.
Correct, it would be an area variance.
Yeah.
I just wonder, is that something we would want to consider as opposed to, like, instead of doing across the board prohibiting on all frontage? Like, I'm just thinking about Front Street, the current one. That's not in a high pedestrian zone, it's tucked back. It's not on 52. So maybe if we gave the planning board the flexibility to incorporate something like, or approve something like that, it might save, I'm not sure we can anticipate every street that this might come up on.
Yeah, I have a similar kind of concern. I mean, this is not a use that's somehow noxious or, to be discouraged because of the use itself. I think the rationale was that it would not generate high traffic, and therefore in areas where we expect a lot of pedestrians, we'd want to be able to limit its use there. I actually think the market would take care of it on its own because this particular use requires a lot of property. There's no way in the universe they can afford a Main Street property for it. So while I'm willing to go forward with this, I'm kind of with George, which is I don't see what the problem is on a low pedestrian use street.
So the question is, are we going to give the planning board the flexibility, or would that have to go to a ZBA?
I think you could also, it doesn't necessarily need to go to the planning board. I think as drafting this legislation, if you look at the memo, I tried to go through and list all the streets. So if the council wanted to select specific streets that it felt were appropriate to apply this, those would be the only ones, right, Nick? Those would be the only ones that would be subject to
To the special permit.
to the special permit.
Right, and then others would be permitted as of right, just needing site plan approval, not a special permit.
Right, we could, yeah, so we could change it that, so it wouldn't necessarily need to be something that we could or at least specifically say that the frontage, the locational requirements apply only to streets fronting, or to parcels fronting on certain streets. So you could select those and put that into the code.
Correct.
Yeah,
So there's Fishkill Avenue, Beekman Street, I think East Main are the ones that come to mind as, and then I think the council, I'll take your lead on Tyranda, Front Street, and some of those other ones listed in the memo.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's my neck of the woods. I mean, Judson Street is only here because Bob's Deli is on the corner and Bob's Deli is GB. It's a residential area. There should not be. So, and I feel like Herbert is kind of a similar one. That doesn't make sense to me to allow the frontage there either.
But then Front Street has so much residential all around it too, even though it's in a dead end where the current self-storage is. And then doesn't some of where Herbert is, I mean, it might not be the front, but like Main Street, the corner of Main and Herbert.
Yeah, it's that building, or that
But
lot.
I guess the front might be on Herbert.
I guess so, yeah.
And then if we're looking at it where they can't do the front on that road, but they could do it on Main, because it's on Main also.
So the list, and let me read them off: Fishkill Avenue, Tyranda Ave, East Main, Front Street, Beekman Street, Dennings, South Ave, River Street, Herbert, and Judson. It's on page 3 of our packet. This is the ones if we wanted to include it, this would be areas that they would not be allowed, and otherwise they would be allowed in those zones.
Well, what I tried to do with that list, and I think we would add, based on Pam's comment, I think we would add Main Street to that. I didn't realize that property had double frontage. What I tried to do there was just list out the properties that HI, LI, or GB parcels have frontage on, so that in having this conversation about should it be all streets or just some streets, the council would have in front of them the list of streets that we're discussing, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm okay with saying Fishkill Ave and Main Street. Obviously, those are our main residential, heavy pedestrian areas. Tyranda is interesting because it is alongside our Fishkill Creek development, and we're basically removing a commercial use from a zone that we've required 25% commercial. I'm concerned about doing that street because we seem to want the commercial use, although I don't think it's very attractive there. But East Main, the other ones, well, Front Street, I don't think we should include. I think we should remove that from the list. I'm okay more or less with the others. Beekman Street, again, I just don't think any of these would be very would be very doable economically, because again, our property values are such that when competing with the ability to build a 3-story commercial residential structure versus a self-storage, there's just no way a self-storage can afford it. So I'm just, again, I think my main focus would just be on Main Street and Fishkill Ave, and let the others go. I mean, think about, Judson Street that you raised, Amber, or even Herbert. There isn't a space big enough to handle it. Herbert's an interesting exception, but if you said Main Street and Herbert, I could see that, because we've got that warehouse building right on that corner, so I could see that one. But I think even that wouldn't be affordable. So.
I guess I'm hesitant to depend on the market to determine. I think it should be in the zoning language, because markets change. I'm not saying it's likely, but markets change. And I'm not sure I want to depend so heavily on that.
So how about then if we said Main Street, Fishkill Ave, East Main, although I'm not seeing exactly where, Herbert, might just stop there. I don't think Dennings has anything that's built out and it's residential. South Ave, similar, unless they're going to buy the church, which I don't think is going to work. River Street, the same. Herbert and Judson, really the same. Maybe Beekman, I'd be okay with that too, because we're expecting that to become a pedestrian, focus group. So that would say Main Street, Fishkill Ave, Beekman Street, Herbert. Does that pick everything up that we think will be, has some property that could be developed that's big enough, and that we're expecting residential pedestrian traffic?
I would include Tyranda as well, because the proposed rail trail goes right past there, and there's a lot of residential units there as well.
So Natalie, on Tyranda, would this apply to the FCD zone or only to the NELI, HI in there?
Right now, self-storage is not permitted at all in the FCD zone, but any of the LI or HI that abut the creek, obviously would be packed. So if we're talking about Tyranda specifically, let me just.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, George, as well. So if it already is precluded in the FCD zone, I'm happy to let it go and include Tyranda as well.
Okay.
I'm fine with what you proposed. Lee as well. And Dennings in particular, I think where the LI is low down, where there are other kind of light industrial areas. So I appreciate we're kind of developing that area, and so is the museum as well. But I feel like if there was some future where self-storage went in there, I don't think it would interfere with the kind of environment we're trying to create in that area.
Yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents too. All right, so we're suggesting George's proposal is to enumerate streets that it would be precluded. Would it be precluded, or would it require a special use permit and then otherwise allowed? Or would it be precluded? What are you thinking, George?
Oh, I think I would rather it be within the special use, remain there.
All right, so we enumerate streets
Yeah.
that require a special
Special use,
use
correct.
and then otherwise okay within those zones.
Yes.
So that's the proposal. People okay with that?
Is that different? Because then the use table, Natalie, it says special permit for all, kind of across the board for those districts that allow self-storage. If we name specific streets where self-storage is not allowed, does that mean that it is permitted rather than special permit for the other streets? Or can
Yeah,
it still
I mean,
all be
Nick,
special
we could chat
permit?
about this. Like, I think,
Yeah.
I mean, I think, so I guess I would think the more appropriate way would be within the table, right? It would be special permit in all the districts, but when you get to the locational requirements or restrictions within that new subsection that's been created, that is where it would say like the frontage requirement and the setback requirement apply only on these roadways, or I guess then you wouldn't have any special permit criteria associated with the other one. So I'm not quite sure how to necessarily do that off the top of my head.
No, right, but you and I can spend some time and talk about that and come up with the best way to put it into a local law. The local law is being amended such that it's going to need to be referred back to the county and to the city planning board and a new public hearing held. So Natalie and I will have time to sort of take your comments tonight, revise the local law, have it ready for Monday for you to set that new hearing and refer it to the city and the county.
I'm outruled here, but just for the record, I'm completely fine with prohibiting the frontage as recommended in this memo.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Amber, actually. I'm not seeing a strong benefit to allowing self-storage in some of these additional areas, knowing that, you know, the ZBA is a release valve here if there's a really obvious fit.
For clarification, Nick and Natalie, if we went with what Amber and Paloma are suggesting, that the language you already have in here is fine, would that also require being referred back to the planning board, or would that be able to be voted on quicker?
No, our opinion is it would be, because we're introducing the special permit requirement, the locational requirements are all new to this local law.
Sorry, I didn't quite, so either way it would go to the planning board, sorry, the county planning board, or no?
That is correct. Either way requires a new public hearing and referral to the city and county planning board.
All right, but I don't sense any urgency. We don't have, you know, imminent applications, right?
I don't see a reason to, I do sense some sense of urgency, just to not invite additional applications. But if the process is the process, then we'll go through it.
Okay, so Natalie, can you summarize where you think we're at?
Yeah, so what I have is that we will change it so that the locational requirements and the special permit restrictions apply only to parcels within these 3 zoning districts that front on Main Street, Fishkill, Beekman, Herbert, and Tyranda.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Yeah. Okay, and as Paloma said, the process is the process, right? So, and again, I don't see there's any risk of delay. Okay, that takes care of that one. What about drive-through? Do we want to shift to that?
Yeah, I can give it, we did not have any, as I noted at the top, we did not have any changes to the proposed legislation, so that remains the same as the last time that the council saw it. So I think there is the option, if we want to talk about splitting these, we put them together because they were both recommendations from the committee, from the Fishkill Avenue Committee. But I could be drafting two separate local laws if the council felt that was more appropriate, if we want to keep workshopping the self-storage piece.
So I would assume the council would want us to split them up at this point.
Yeah, particularly if there's something pending, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we would split them up, right?
Yeah, so we'll be able to move forward on the drive-through decision, even though the self-storage will require additional review. Am I
That's
understanding that
correct,
correctly?
yes.
Okay.
That works.
All right, so I think that's all we have to do on that one. Okay. So the next one is just an overview of our tax assessment process. And Kathy, you should come and join us because there's no podium, so you can't stand there.
And thank you, Natalie.
So this is our assessor,
Thank you.
Kathy Martin, who's
Thanks, Natalie.
Thanks, Natalie.
as a side profession as the mayor of the village of Fishkill.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how
Hey,
are you?
Mayor.
Hi, thank you for having me. So, yeah, we were going to discuss the assessment process tonight. This is a good time to discuss it because I've just signed off of our tentative assessment roll, and I'm currently waiting for that to be printed by Dutchess County for us. So we will be sending out change of assessment notices shortly. So it's that time of year again. But we just want to do a little overview of the assessment process. And so the first is the purpose of the assessments. The assessment of real property is the method employed to allocate taxes by the county, city, and school district and library among all property owners and all taxpayers within the city of Beacon. So in short, that just means how the tax burden is divided up. The school district's school budget, the city budget, and the county budget. And so property taxes are the principal means of revenue for public and school district services. Next slide, please. And I think it's important to know that assessments are not taxes, because generally when someone comes to my office to inquire, they always want to challenge their taxes, or they think their taxes are too high. But really, all that I have control over are the assessments, not the actual tax bills. And that's what I meant on the first slide when we spoke about how that is allocated, the school taxes and the county taxes and the property taxes. So that amount is then apportioned and collected based on the assessment of the individual properties. And as a result, a change in assessment does not necessarily result in or correlate to an increase in taxes. On the contrary, the last few years, we've seen a decrease in the commercial tax rate, and many of the properties have seen a decrease in their tax bills. So an expanding assessment base, all the new construction or physical additions to property, like when people build decks and sheds, or if they add an addition to their property, and then any new construction grows the pie or grows the base. So that helps to give more to spread it around to. So that's how, as the base grows, as there is more development, and also as the real estate values have increased, that is what grows the pie per se, and allows us to spread things out even more. Next slide, please. So in the city of Beacon, we do assess at 100% of market value. We are in an annual reassessment program. We've been in this program for about 20 years now. Well, 18 years. Time flies. But that's where all the assessments are looked at and readjusted on a year-to-year basis. We look at all the categories of land. We look at the vacant land. We look at improved residential properties, commercial properties, industrial and utility properties. So we look at them all separately. And that, the 100% valuation is really the method of assessment that is sought by New York State. And it also really promotes equity, I believe. When you're not reassessing annually, it seems to, if there is inequity, it can just exasperate it over time. Doing the annual reassessments always gives us the opportunity to stay current. And I really believe that it's easier for the public to understand, because when you do fractional assessing, like we used to do years ago, and many municipalities did, because that was just the way it was back then, you would, like, people would see their assessments and think they were very low because they were only seeing like 28% of the value. But when the taxes were calculated, they were bringing, the tax rate was much higher. So the value really was the same. It just looked different, and it was hard for people to understand. So when you're at 100%, it's like pretty easy. Like if something's worth 500,000, you know, generally that's what we assess it for. Instead of, I feel like, you know, a fractional assessment of like 50,000 is very confusing for people. So I think this is just a much easier way for people to understand their assessments. Next slide, please. And so what we look at when we do our reassessing every year is the sales trend. New York State calculates based on all the sales data from the city and neighboring municipalities, and they tell us where they think that we would be. And then it's my job to either prove to them, you know, where they're wrong and I think where we should be, or to agree or find a happy medium, because New York State does certify our equalization rate. So I have to go through a bit of a process with them in order to get them to approve us at 100%. And if we were to not come to an agreement, the state would then just assess whatever value they thought. So that could result in a big change. So then we also go over the inventory review. We look at the data that we have for the properties. We look at the COs and building permits that are taken out each year, and then do the valuation based on, for residential properties, primarily sales-based. We look at sales of similar homes, similar square footage, similar age. And for commercial properties, we generally rely on the income approach, the income and expense approach to valuation, because the courts have told us that that is the most applicable approach to value for commercial properties. There's always three approaches to value. You always have the cost approach, you have the sales approach when you look at other sales of similar properties, or you have the income approach when you look at the income and expenses for a commercial property. And then we also take into consideration the adjusted base proportions, which is another topic that I generally come to talk to you guys about. And that really is the breakdown of our assessment roll and the percentage of it, how much is residential and how much is commercial, and how they're moving. And that really comes into play when the tax rates are calculated, the homestead and non-homestead tax rates.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. I just wanted to ask about the commercial valuation. Just, you know, it feels easy to find comps for homes, right? So is that income information publicly available, or where does that come from?
Well, there is information publicly available. That's just like general market information. So we do look at that. Also, I ask, you know, property owners for that information. If someone asks me to take a look and review their assessment, generally if it's a commercial property, I'll ask for the last 3 years worth of income and expense statements, or we will look at income information from similar kinds of properties.
Okay.
While we're on this page too, Kathy, I think you probably get a lot of questions of, oh, my home or my neighbor's home sold for X amount of money. Why is that not changing the assessment to the way that I think it should? And I see that this slide I can understand could be confusing because the word sales is mentioned multiple times. So can you kind of talk about the difference between an individual home sale versus the way that sale prices generally are taken into consideration?
Well, we don't ever hang our hat on just one sale. So that's one thing. We try to look at many sales because there could be extenuating circumstances that I may not know about. I do a fair amount of research when I verify the sales information. Like if something looks to be too high, too low, I will do some investigation by calling the attorney, maybe that was involved, or the real estate agent, because we're given all of that information. And we'll try to find out whether it was a valid sale or not. I don't know if that answered your question.
And Kathy, I'll ask you to kind of make sure I'm thinking of this the right way. I hear that a lot too, right? But I think that something I heard Kathy say a little bit earlier was about the comps in the market. So, maybe the home that sold was something that had recently been renovated and was very updated. Meanwhile, my house across the street is less bedrooms, less bathrooms. So it wouldn't be a comparable to that one home sale, right? Like you're looking at the data of like properties versus just one home that sold for whatever the market value was at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, establishing comps, you look at a number of descriptors of a property.
Yes.
The size of the lot, square footage of the home, the number of bedrooms, the status of it being updated or not,
yes,
based on permits and other things, right?
Right, correct.
And so it would tend to adjust for those sorts of things,
yes,
and would explain why, well, two houses on the same street have different
absolutely, yeah. And that's where I do work very closely with the building department. So we are really in constant contact as far as seeing things out in the field and working together, reporting back to each other what we're finding out there. And, it's always good for us to share information like that. It makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah, two things I would add, and I appreciate this, Kathy. The nice thing about being a full value community where we, try to be at actual, the assessments are set close to their market value, is that if you come in at around 95 and a little percent of value, meaning, for instance, at a $100,000 home, you valued around $95,000, if you get it right, ORPS will give you 100%.
Yes.
And that means that we get a small benefit, actually, for staying at full value.
Yes. And that's where my relationship and my conversations with my I don't know what they're calling them now, but my representative from the state come in really handy, and I feel they've been wonderful to work with, really. But that is very true. We only have to come in within a 5% swing, and as long as we achieve that, then they will certify us at 100%.
Right, and the contrary example is say our assessments came in at 50% of market, so a $100,000 property is assessed at 50.
Right.
ORPS would just multiply the rate by 2.
Yes.
And we would be paying as if it were 100.
Exactly.
But by staying at full value, we actually pay a little bit less than communities who aren't doing full value.
Right.
That's their problem.
Yes.
Right.
No, I think that we've done a great job, the city of Beacon, in undertaking the reval, because it was a huge undertaking at the time, and just maintaining. I think it's really important. And like I said earlier, I do really think it's easier for the general public to understand. So, can we have the next slide? And so this is our timeline for assessing. March 1st is taxable status date. That date might sound familiar because it's also our exemption deadline. A lot of things in our assessment world revolve around March 1st. So that is just passed, and like I said earlier, we've signed off of our tentative assessment roll. So May 1st, that will be published. It'll be available for the public. It will be here physically in the City Hall. It will be available online. It also is available on Dutchess County Parcel Access for anybody but that would like to look it up. But we also will be sending out change of assessment notices, as we do every year. We also send out decrease notices as well, so it's increase and decrease notices. The fourth Wednesday in May is always our grievance day. This year, it's just after Labor Day.
Memorial Day.
It's the 28th,
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Oh,
You
I'm
said
sorry.
Labor Day.
I always do that, Memorial Day. I always switch those two. But not that I'm trying to skip May or anything. It's a busy month. And then July 1st, we've published the final assessment roll. And so just to make it like a little simpler, we're going to send out the change of assessment notices. People have about a month to review them. As I said, you can look up the whole assessment roll for the whole county on Dutchess County Parcel Access, or there will be a link on our website for the city for the tentative assessment roll as well. So people will have about 4 weeks to do their research and decide if they'd like to challenge their assessment. And then if they do decide that they want to do that, they could call me and make an appointment, have an informal meeting with me, see if we can come to an agreement. If that doesn't work out, they can always then, or they could skip me altogether and just go straight to grievance day. On grievance day, I'm not in charge of the assessment roll. The Board of Assessment Review is. It's the checks and balances in government. So the assessor is out of control that day, and a board of volunteers from the city of Beacon that are all residents that are given special training by the county are in charge of the assessment roll. So they will then meet with people and decide whether or not they feel they should get a reduction. And if they feel so, they will grant it. And then if people are unhappy with that still, they could then file a small claims. So there's several steps, and there's several mechanisms for people to be heard if they feel that their assessment isn't accurate.
Is the only time where they can meet with you individually and influence the current assessment before May 28th? If they wait until after that, they have to do grievance day or small claims court?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they would have to go to grievance day in order to go to small claims.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm here all year, so I'm always available for people if they want to come in and talk to me about their assessment. It's funny, a lot of the laws are designed for, they have to keep in mind the whole state, and there's a lot of small rural communities where assessors maybe don't have regular office hours, or, so they really spell out in the law like what you have to do this time of year around grievance day. But really, I'm available all year. If someone wants to make an appointment, come in and talk, go over their data, we have an open door policy.
Okay.
But if now that I've signed off of the roll, the tentative roll, what they would have to do would be make an appointment and come in, and maybe we could come to what's called a stipulated agreement.
Okay.
And then at that point, we would both sign off on an agreed upon value, and then the person waives their right to go to grievance day. So that ends there. But if we don't come to an agreement, then they would still have the right to go to grievance day and see what happens there. And if they're not happy with that, they can go to small claims.
Thank you.
And Kathy, if they can't make grievance day, we can accommodate them on a Saturday, I think we.
Well, those are
talked about.
the hours that when they call it when I sit with the roll,
Right.
even though I'm here all year, but that's for the rural communities. So one of the days has to be a Saturday, and then one has to be an evening. So, to accommodate people so they don't have to take off of work. Those would be like scheduled meetings.
Right.
For the stipulated agreement. So there's going to be several days that are going to be, posted, and they are put out in a public notice, and they're sent to all of the taxpayers of when they can make an appointment. And, you know, we do try to make accommodations. Like if someone works out of town and they have trouble getting in, we'll make accommodations to work with them. But grievance day is that one day, so you do not have to be present. You can prepare your form and any supporting documentation and drop it off, and the board will hear your case and they will send you a determination in June.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, next slide. Oh, and then we just wanted to touch upon exemptions again. So we do have a lot of exemptions available in the city of Beacon. A lot of people know about STAR, but believe it or not, there are some people who don't, who haven't heard of it. But that's school tax relief. Please look it up online or come and see me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Basic STAR is based on residency, so basically everybody is eligible for that. There is an extended STAR for senior citizens. That's also based on income. But I just wanted to bring up the senior citizen, low-income senior citizen, and the disabled person's limited income, because I just wanted to thank the mayor and the city council for passing the new local law extending the savings for the seniors and for people with disabilities, because you've helped a lot of people, and I just wanted to thank you for that. We have a lot more people getting exemptions. People that were getting exemptions are now going to save more. And it was, so you used to only be able to make $30,000 to qualify. You guys raised it to $50,000, and that will change people's lives. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could also talk about the phrase you use, growing the pie, right? And I'll use percentages because it's the best way to think about the problem. So assume we have a tax base and so there's some new construction. Let's say the new construction is 1% of the tax base. So if we have 100 homes and all of a sudden we have 101, that means before everything else is done, everyone's tax will go down 1% because there's this new party that's come in. Right? And yes, you can tell me it's not exactly 1%, it's a slight difference, but it's easier to talk about the numbers that way. That's the first number, which is what's new construction. Our new construction has been coming in at 1 to 2% new construction a year, meaning adding to that, growing the pie. And so that's dropping everyone's tax burden to begin with. And the second one is you have to do assessments as well. And let's say everyone's assessment on average goes up 10%. Last year, your letter said for residential construction, that number was up 10%. That doesn't mean your taxes are going up 10%, because if we only raise taxes 2%, that means the tax rate will drop 8% to accommodate that.
Yes.
Right? And so it's a function of what does the city council do in terms of how much we increase the tax as a percentage, and then any new growth will reduce that amount that existing taxpayers pay. And so the assessment increase isn't really what's driving your taxes, it's the new construction and the tax increase that the city council or the school district, they did a higher number this year, approves.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Yes, absolutely. And we've had a tremendous amount of growth, which is wonderful. So.
Yeah, our rate has dropped almost to half of the city of Poughkeepsie's rate.
Yeah.
And it used to be about the same.
It's incredible, really. Yeah. So I did, like I said, I did send out the notices, and I did put that little note on there again. This year, the increase was approximately 6.5%. So.
For homes?
For residential.
For residential?
Yes.
Okay. And it's always it's always sort of about a year behind,
it is,
right?
Yeah, because the valuation date for that is July 1st of 2024. So I'm always a little bit back in time. So when we're looking for comps, we're going to be looking for comps from like July of 2023 to July of 2024. So, but the market's been incredibly strong here in Beacon, so.
And it's important for people to understand that 6.5% increase isn't an increase in the taxes.
Right.
Because it interacts with the tax rates that the council will set in later this year.
Yes.
Like last year, houses went up about 10%, but the effective tax rate was under 3 because
Yes.
we lowered the rates.
Right.
And then one question, the veterans exemption, is that only for Cold War veterans when I've looked at, or is it for all veterans?
Yeah, well, originally, we have one, it's called Alternative Veterans. That is for wartime veterans.
Okay.
So when I was first an assessor, that was the only one they had. And I used to feel really bad because people would come in and they had served, but they just didn't serve during the right period of time. So eventually, enough people spoke up to Albany, and they did come up with a Cold War exemption. It's not as big of a savings as the wartime, but there is a Cold War exemption. Yeah.
Thanks.
So
I've seen
that's-
that in the code, and I was wondering.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. It's a little funny. They started it and they said, oh, we're only going to do it for 10 years, and then we're going to sunset it. And it's, how do you do that? So that never happened.
And Kathy, do you want to just mention the exemption that we're considering to bring to the council for the ADUs?
Yeah, I know a little bit about this. So there had been some discussion about the ADU properties and working with Hudson River Housing. I believe there was an exemption, I think it was for the first 80,000.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Up to the first 80,000
Right.
of increased value.
And I believe that the, thought behind that was to help people to, kind of offset some of the burden. So, if
So we'll be bringing that sometime next year. It won't go into effect until the next taxable, the next great assessment day.
I know my years are all crazy
Yeah.
with the dates.
But it was part of that +1 ADU that we did. One of the reasons we got awarded is the municipalities made a commitment to examine that. They don't
Right.
have to, but it was strongly recommended.
Right.
And it phases out. So let's
Yes.
say you build an ADU,
That's correct.
let's say it would otherwise increase your assessment $50,000. That doesn't count. It doesn't increase your assessment, but then over, is it 10 years?
It's 8
Like
years.
10.
8 years. 8
It's
years?
12
8
and-
years.
Yeah, it's 12.5% a year.
8 years. So
So
that,
it'll phase.
it'll phase out over 8
Okay.
years. So it'll go down, the first year down to 46, and then the next year down to 42, and keep going down.
Well, it seems like a very nice incentive. I mean, it would, I think, probably help people. So it's something to consider for
So
sure.
we're working with Keenan Bean on the details of that to bring
Okay.
to council.
Right, for those interested, it's real property tax law, New York State Real Property Tax Law 421-P, that sets forth the criteria, and we're working on that, and we'll discuss with you, Kathy.
Nick, I think you're a little too close to your mic again. Sorry.
Sorry about that, Chris.
That's better.
I heard we have to read Real Property Tax Code 421-2 as
Yes,
our
tonight.
homework. Got
Dash
it.
To get to
Okay.
sleep.
Yeah.
We're all rushing to it right now.
Thanks, Nick.
That's if you can't sleep.
Right,
That's
right.
when you leave.
Good tip.
You have one more slide.
Oh, one more slide, please, Ben.
Resources.
Here it comes. Oh, resources. So that's me, Kathleen Martin. You can reach me at 838-5025. That's my office line. I'm going to give you my assistant's phone number, too. That's 838-5016.
And that's Sylvia, who is
That
a
is
great
Sylvia.
addition to our team.
Yes, she's a wonderful addition. She's been doing great. And then there are just some tax resources if you want to look up. There's different, you can look up the grievance form or grievance information. A lot of information online on the tax and finance website. Pretty much everything you could ever want. So.
Thank you.
But does anybody have any other questions or?
One question, I know there was a resident here last week asking that they were looking at property to buy and the property taxes were a lot different, or they were saying the assessed value was going to be different. Is it typical when someone buys a house that the assessment is going to go up? Especially, like, I don't know if it's maybe there was an issue before.
Well, a lot of things depend on timing, because my calendar, so with the valuation dates and the sales dates that I can use and everything. So a lot would be a timing issue. A sale is not the only thing we look at. That's really not the only thing I hang my hat on. We look at everything, and it's really only one of the factors that we do look at. There's a lot of sales in Beacon. It's a very active real estate market, so I really have no trouble finding comps.
Okay.
So, you know, and I would think that it would be more of a gradual thing over time, just because of the dates and the valuation dates and everything.
And I spoke to the constituent at length. It was going to be about a $200,000 jump from the assessed value to what the proposed sales price was. And she had called our deputy assessor, who said it can go up to the sales price. It doesn't necessarily go there, but it can, and which is actually quite true, but it's a little more nuanced, because they have to look at the other sales and make sure it's not some outlier that somebody you know, paid more than they could even mortgage. Maybe it's a cash deal, maybe it came with property in the house.
Those are the
on
questions
the other
I
side,
asked.
sometimes you get low sales because they're sales to friends or family. So you have to look at each circumstance. It's not as easy as it just goes to that sales price.
Right.
But it definitely is
It's a factor. We do
It
look
is a
at it,
factor.
but it's not the only thing we look at.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a question? Anybody?
Can you remind us, Chris, when Sylvia started? Because you'd mentioned it was the top of your list to have that deputy assessor, like back when we were talking the budget in November. So when did Sylvia start? And this is like, I think it was like top of your list for things that you wanted to have.
Let me think.
Well,
first.
we've had a deputy all along. It's
Yeah.
just we lost our longtime deputy.
Her mom had passed away, so we lost our,
Yeah,
assistant.
Sylvia's been on almost a year, right?
oh, I don't think, maybe not quite that long, maybe,
Yeah, it's under a year.
yeah. But she's been doing great, so.
But we didn't change the position. She's essentially doing the same position.
She's
as-
actually working the same exact hours, even, so.
But yeah, it's a ton of work. I really appreciate the overview of what we're
Oh,
doing.
thank you.
But just for that, so maybe I misheard though, but I thought in November, like when we were talking budget, you said it was like top of your priority was getting deputy assessor. Was that something else? A
I think
different
it was
position?
finance
I-
department.
You mentioned a finance person
it's in
too.
finance.
I had
Yeah.
that as another bullet on there too, so that's why I was.
I mean, it's not the top of the list. I mean, honestly, if I had to say, firefighters right now are at the top of my
You
list.
had that there too.
You know, and again, we see what we have each year. I'm trying to have stable, sustainable growth. So we're only adding 1, 2, sometimes 3 positions a year. I think right now we're good where we are. We're always going to look for opportunities to build resilience, though.
Yeah, just to revisit, you said deputy to assessor, you needed a finance person, 2 more fire department personnel, and you wanted full-time planner. That was the 4 that I took note of that night.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the assessor was filling an existing slot. It wasn't a new slot, right?
It would have been taking the part-time to full-time. And it's something Kathy and I have talked about. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, fitting it in at a particular time. It's kind of dependent on what else happens. When the state sends a bill for an extra $500,000 for our retirement contribution, some of my dreams go away.
A little at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No
they just
comment.
get crushed.
They just go a little bit.
This is a small thing, Kathy, but I recall we started asking that when the assessment letters go out, that on that letter is included the information about what days you're sitting with the book.
Yes.
Is that still
Yes.
protocol?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're also posting it, like we have to post things up here.
And we'll put them on the website, too.
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
a news page on the website.
Yep. And it does actually goes in the newspaper too, but I don't know if anybody, I'm not sure, you know, those little ones in the back, like, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Kathy.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Kathy.
You too.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, next one, there's a Royal Carting Agreement for trash and recycling collection, and that's Chris or Nick?
It will be me with maybe some Nick
Okay.
backup. So we've discussed this in the past where I've tried to roll over our garbage contracts so that we don't have great year-to-year jumps in cost. We have successfully extended this contract, which started in 2019, and the delivery cost has not gone up in all those years. In fact, last year, we did a couple things that I can talk about that have brought down the cost. So the net cost has been going down because we're doing a better job of measuring the weight of the garbage and the weight of the recycling that are picked up. So we're not paying for more than we should be paying. This year, the Royal came back and they said, you know, we haven't had an increase in a long time. We would like a 5% increase. Labor has gone up. We talked with them about that because we had made some changes to streamline the pickup, particularly for recycling, that had saved them some money, and we came to a 1% agreement. The 1% agreement is about $6,600 a year increase. The net cost is actually going to go down because we have been doing a better job monitoring the recycling and the garbage weights. And so the delivery will be going up by 1%, but the cost of disposal has gone down because the volume has gone down. So I think this is a good deal. Our current contract expires at the end of this year. The reason I'm bringing it so early is because I wanted to lock in next year before there's any changes. And also, if we couldn't have come to an agreement, I would have needed to set up a whole extensive bid process, which would have taken months and months.
And are we on a yearly cycle with
Yes,
them?
we are.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the cost that they've proposed is actually less than what we budgeted for in 2025
Okay.
overall.
Well, I certainly, I mean, I certainly applaud that we, you know, that you were able to negotiate to something that's within the budget, and, you know, knowing what the market is like for trash and recycling pickup, I think that it's wonderful that we are able to maintain a reasonable expense for that. So I don't have, no objection. I just was curious about the
And then
length of the terms of the contract.
I do want to thank Jamie Mesnick because she's been monitoring this contract, and that has helped to drive the cost down because she really understands how the system works and holds them accountable. The other cool thing I do want to mention is that we used to have 2 sets of trucks that went around the city doing recycling. So first they would go and do our recycling, take it over to Republic Services on Fishkill Avenue, dump it, get a weight, then they'd come back and they'd do a whole nother round through the city picking up the private recycling, things like condominiums and large apartment buildings, and then they'd go and dump again. What we came to is a new system. We didn't think that that was always helping us because sometimes the drivers inadvertently put private recycling in the public truck. And so what we did is now we do exactly what we do for garbage, where we don't look at the actual weight every week. We do quarterly audits. Jamie Mesnick follows the truck, makes sure only our recycling and our garbage is getting picked up. And that has lowered the tonnage quite a bit. We're down about 10% on the tonnage.
This is Jamie's calling. And I'm so glad that we connected her with it.
Following them?
Yeah, and she physically gets out of the car and says, "Don't you pick that up. That's private recycling." So those weeks, we have the 2 sets of trucks. And it gives us the data so that the rest of the year, we have 1 set of truck, and now they can commingle it.
Does Jamie offer a ride along for this? I would be so interested.
This has got to be fascinating. We may have to raffle this off.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think the 1% increase is to kind of offset the losses that Jamie has caused to Royal. But we have a great relationship with Royal. I have to say, you know, I've been really pleased with how this has evolved over the last years, and I find them just a valuable partner. And I really like that we have less trucks on the road today than we did a year ago.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't use this opportunity to remind people that we have municipal drop spots for composting. So if you want to keep waste out of the incinerator and it's food waste, they are there for your use, and there are 3 of them, and maybe more coming, but they're very easy to use. They're very convenient. So, yeah.
And we diverted 67.5 tons last year of waste.
Yeah, wow, it's quite a lot.
So 135,000 pounds estimated.
Yeah.
So great job, and please keep doing it. And no, the plastic bags that say they're compostable are not compostable.
BPI. No BPI.
And there's not many municipalities that offer the garbage within the municipalities, are there?
Cities do more than towns and villages. Like the village of Cold Spring, I think, does. The city of Kingston certainly does. Poughkeepsie has a separate fee for it. But a lot of the towns, you're on your own. And then what I like about our system is you don't have 5 different companies going down the same street. Where I live in the town, it's not regulated. And you literally have 5 different vendors all picking up different garbage on the same street, sometimes on the same day. And it makes no sense from an air emissions and a road impacts and noise quality.
Okay, everybody good?
Yep. Thank you.
All right, so let's cover the 4th item, which is we're going to talk about communications. Chris, you got some slides you want to run us through, and then
Yeah,
we'll
so
just
I'm
open it
going
up
to
to
just do a
discussion.
quick overview of what we do now so that you have that for your conversation, and then you can figure out where you want to go with that. So the mayor asked me to put this together just to inform the discussion. Ben, if you can go to the first slide, please, after this one. Thanks. So going through, one of the things that we have is a RAVE 911 mobile safety system. This is something that more than 4,500 people have signed up for in the city. We use it infrequently. We try to be discreet about when we do it so that it's not overused. Things that we've used it for are water service breaks, and we can go to geographic areas. So if we know several streets are going to be out, if you've registered your address, we can actually target that. We've talked about drought emergencies, burn bans, the water meter fine amnesty, and if you click on the link that's in this packet, you can sign up. So if you haven't signed up, or you know people who haven't signed up, please do so, and you can get a text, you can get a call, and or an email. And again, we're not bombing this every few days. We're just telling you, hey, it snowed. It's more than 2 inches. Just reminder that you need to move your cars off Main Street.
Can I just ask, can people update what their options are right now? So I think I have it coming in always. And you don't really need it.
I believe so, and I think if you call Ben at 838-5000, he can walk you through that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you'd have to log in. We'd have to figure out what your login is. And you can update preferences. Ben, the next slide, please. So then we have our website, and some of you remember we transitioned over a few years ago from a .org, which is timely because the state just passed a law that requires all municipalities now by the end of the year to have a .gov to clearly identify. We are actually going through the list of things that the state requires, and I think we have all but like 2 minor ones. So those are things like your contact information. You can find all of your contact information, the department heads. You can submit requests for Freedom of Information Law requests. You can look at our permits, and many of those, I think all of the forms are now online. And we also have auto translation on the website, so if you're not strong in English, you have another language, you can just go to the drop down and figure out what language you want. Again, this is, we post a few times a week. You'll see a news thing. We maintain a calendar. I take the point that we don't have a housing page, and Ben and I are working on developing that. So again, that was a good suggestion. By the way, Dutchess County hosts our website, so we work with them on this. Ben, next. The other website that we use is the MyRec website for the Recreation Department. The Recreation is our most public-facing department. It has a lot of programs that they're signing people up for, pool, swims, and so of course they really have developed the best communication systems in the city. But I wanted you to be aware of MyRec, and we'll talk about a couple other things that Recreation hosts. Ben, next slide. We have the 2 video channels, YouTube and Vimeo. All of our city council meetings and the land use boards are posted to that. Special meetings, like when we had the Fishkill Avenue corridor, that was put on. On YouTube, you can get subtitles and auto translation. On Vimeo, you can actually get a transcript of the meeting. It doesn't download great. You have to copy and paste it into a Word document, but it is available. And we have tried to keep as many of these online as possible. We, they used to take them down, and we now try to go back as many years as we can. And before I go back, on the website as well, we have all of the videos, the video links, and all of the old agendas, and we've also been putting up all of the resolutions. So in 2022, we started listing all the resolutions. So like if you wanted to figure out when did we pass X, you can, if you know the year, you go there and you just search it, and you can find that resolution. Next slide, please. Social media is really Facebook and a little bit of Instagram for recreation. We don't do TikTok, and we stopped doing Twitter some years ago. We have a pretty good following on our main page, about 3,900 people. Last month we had 110,000 views on our social media, and some things get a little bit of attention, and other things take off and get quite a bit of attention. When I came on, there were 3 other Facebook pages: the police, recreation, and fire. The fire page is largely moribund. We just kind of wrap that into the regular, we do their announcements now on our social media. Police and rec we have left alone because they have discrete followers, some of whom are only really want to hear about the parks, or only really want to hear about the police. And we do kind of cross posts so that people will come, and when they come to our social media, we do invite them. So we've picked up about 1,000 followers in the last 4 years. We do invite, when we see new names, we invite them. We try to have timely updates and put enough on that people are interested in seeing it and sharing it. I also cross-post these on the main Beacon page, which is the oldest and the largest page, and sometimes other ones depending on, there's a buy-sell group. So like if we're having an auction, I'll post that on that. Recreation, as I mentioned, does have an Instagram page, and the police department page has quite a bit of support. It has 3,300 followers. So a lot of people in that, in other departments and stuff watch that as well. Ben, next.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add is that the police and fire in the city were actually discrete URLs until 2020, and we just combined them all into beaconny.gov, which, is appropriate. So.
Yeah, and again, if there was a case for consolidation, we could do that. I just haven't seen the need. The police get timely information out, and I think they do a great job, as does recreation.
Yep.
Once in a while, we'll have a conversation about, is this really something that we should be posting or not, and that has worked. We also have Channel 22, which is on cable and is part of our franchise agreement with Optimum, or it used to be Cablevision. Now it's, I think large company is Altice. And the council meetings rotate through with the workshops, planning board, and the ZBA. Sometimes Pete will post on that video of special events like Spirit of Beacon Day. This again has probably skews to an older audience. I remember Mayor Gould would watch this pretty regularly and then call me after she'd see the meetings to give really good advice. And
Do we have any data about how many individuals watched Channel 22?
I don't know how we get that, but that's a Pete question and I can ask. And then finally, Ben, last slide, please. We do press releases that go, our local press, luckily we have good local papers. The fact that we have the Highland Currents doing in-depth coverage and the Beacon Free Press, Mid-Hudson News gives us quite a bit of coverage. Poughkeepsie, the dailies have largely died out. Poughkeepsie Journal has like less than one full-time journalist anymore. So once in a while we get a little bit on that, but we do the press releases and then we push them out through our social media. For things that are regulatory, we'll do mailings. So you're going to see coming up a mailing about an issue that we had at the water plant with our disinfection system. So we have to, as part of the regulation, get that out. Those will go in the mail shortly. In areas where we're doing work where we quick need to shut off water, they'll actually go door to door. I mentioned we do cross postings, and then one of the things I'm pretty proud of is our interdepartment communication. We have a weekly meeting so that people in all the departments know what's going on. That way, if somebody's opening a road, you know, police, fire, highway, water, building department, all know, oh, that's Danella Construction, which is laying pipeline for Central Hudson. And again, having that free flow of information every week has been really helpful. And we get insights about things, you know, that people thought might only pertain to their department, but it really didn't. And I do regular meetings with the Highlands Current to tell them what projects are coming up. The mayor and I respond frequently to the Beacon Free Press and the Mid-Hudson. And once in a while we get other inquiries and we try to get back to them quickly. And so that's all I have. Thank you.
This was really helpful. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, very much appreciate the baseline, and I hope you don't mind that we're probably going to ask you a ton of questions before you're done.
So what do we all want to do?
Well, I think that we had, so again, this has been very helpful as a baseline, and I think that there is, you know, maybe some next steps that we can think about taking where we might have some gaps. I think one that I see is the ability for the capital C city to communicate with residents, business owners, interested parties via email. I don't think that needs to be something that happens daily, weekly, anything like that. But really the only email communications we have going out are from the rec department. And I think what they do is very appropriate and needed. And, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for us to have some kind of quarterly email where we share updates about the assessment process or point people in the right direction towards resources. So I think that's a gap that I would be interested in seeing us move towards filling. And the other thing would be perhaps a companion that is printed. Again, I'm thinking about how do we communicate about the capital C city business to people so that they feel like they're hearing about it. I think there is a lot of communication. There's a lot of resources on the website, and some of this may just be a matter of kind of consolidating and pointing people in the right direction, but having a little bit of a warmer handoff, I guess. So that would be kind of where I think I see some gaps that we might want to think about filling.
And we're already set up to do the emails.
We are.
Well, you can sign up on, as I was researching this, I'm getting to know our website more and more. We do have the capability to do that.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. And so, yeah, maybe it's just giving people an opportunity to opt into that and starting to think of, what's the right cadence? Again, I do not think it's daily, weekly, maybe even monthly, but what's the right cadence for us to say, like, here's a quarterly view of things that you might need to know, or some important things that we know are coming up that you might want to put on your calendar. So I'm glad we have the ability for people to sign up, and then it's a matter of kind of figuring out like what's the right cadence. And again, you don't want it to be 9,000 pages, short, sweet, easy to understand, the highlights.
And other cities do it. I looked
Yeah.
around, Kingston's doing it, Peekskill, Newburgh,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And then, from there, maybe that's kind of an easy, this is very interesting. Lee's, I'm looking over Lee's shoulder. And maybe that kind of dovetails into again, it depends on the cadence, but do we want to send something out in the mail that either points people towards information on the website, or again, gives them kind of some basic information about, recent changes in legislation, or, again, I think this assessment one was just a really great use case of like, hey, you're going to receive your assessment stuff in the mail. There's a great overview of how assessments work. Go check it out on the city's website. Like, we don't have to send the PowerPoint, but pointing people in that direction so that they have the access to the resources. So I'll pause. Those are the two things that I was kind of thinking through.
So the thing that I put up, that I held on to, there was a single newsletter put out in 2015.
Oh, well, that should do it.
What are you complaining about, Kiriakou?
So, and
We're all set.
it started with, this is the first.
Yeah.
And
only.
Well, because it's work, right?
Yeah.
That just
but
means
anyway.
it's very valuable.
Yeah, it's a collector's item.
So I just found it in my files.
Yeah, speaking of the work that goes into it, can you talk how it exists right now, Chris, in terms of staff capacity and who is managing the website and the Facebook pages, and how that works with your team or other department heads that are doing this?
Yeah, so Recreation is self-sufficient. So they manage my rec, they manage their page. They also manage our main page, so when I need something done and I'm not here, I'll call Heidi or Mark from the rec department to update. Police similarly are self-sufficient. If something comes up where they, we'll review things in advance sometimes, just if there's a sensitive topic, but they're pretty self-sufficient on getting that done. Ben and I do most of the other communications. Ben posts on the website. We'll draft press releases that we work with the mayor on. Statements on, like when water things go out, sometimes the attorney's office is involved because there's particular language that needs to be done. So it really is mostly the departments that have the particular conduits of information, and then Ben and me.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like I know that we run a pretty lean ship, and your primary charge is not, content creation. I wonder if this is an opportunity where it might be helpful to have a freelancer or a consultant for a couple of hours a month to help gather the information and, deploy emails if that's the direction we want to go, or work with a print shop if we're doing that, to just kind of alleviate some of what's on your plate.
Yeah, a model is like what we do with the Climate Smart Coordinator.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it, because, we get swamped sometimes, like when we had the fire, that delayed us getting in news about the Juul settlement. So people are now getting $50 checks in the mail. They don't know if they're real. We just quickly had to catch up and put something on. If we had somebody doing that more regularly, they would probably have that on a schedule and know to drive, like, hey, I need this from you and that from you.
Yeah.
So I'm not averse to that. We can look at how that might work.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a setup process that takes a bunch of time, but having an external resource to kind of do the part of that set up, but, you have to direct them. And you have
Yeah.
to connect them to the department heads and figure out how to set that up. Yeah, because, frankly, there isn't a resource like it right now.
Of course.
And we're just doing it on the fly. Right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not, like, they used to hire a grant writer to do our press releases. And we were spending $40,000 a year, and it's like, I wrote press
They
releases
weren't
for
that
the
good.
congressman for over 10 years, so
Yep.
they're really not hard to do.
Yeah.
But press releases are kind of out of date. I mean, there's not a lot of press anymore. It's more pushing things out by social media. If we had more resources, I'd probably do at least an Instagram page. I mean, I see the numbers of the age of the people that we're hitting, and it's, we're missing the kids.
Yeah, and I mean, social media is great, but it doesn't
Doesn't get
it doesn't hit everybody, and it kind of is its own. Instagram is the one I'm most familiar with. You're not going to be able to post you're going to get a picture and then follow this link to get more.
Right.
So you still kind of need to have a net of different ways for people to access, what's important to them.
It bears repeating that those checks that people are receiving are real from the CCA settlement.
Yeah,
by the way,
absolutely.
for
And
anyone listening at home.
they're about $50 a piece, and we just posted that online tonight because we saw people asking. And we do try to watch the conversation locally, and when people are asking about something, that will often drive our response with a press release, like, okay, this is time we got to get information out. And we'll also try to kind of steer people towards the website, which is really the main repository of our information.
Yeah, and I think that as a strategy of the website being sort of the home base of where all of the information lives, makes sense. And it's about spending that extra little bit of time, and it's great to hear that you're open to potentially adding somebody on the team to help move that along, of actually getting it in front of the people who need it. And I appreciate, Amber, what you're saying about the newsletter and there being a potential printed companion. I do think that there are some things in terms of who we need to reach, or who we might not be reaching right now, that mailed pieces do make a difference for certain people who are not online. And I appreciate that we have a mechanism for doing that. Do you know off the top of your head about how much a mailer costs us to send out?
Well, I mean, you have about 4,600 households here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, just once you have a mail house produce it, let's say it's $1 a piece, so you can do a mailing for under 5,000. And that's just really rough. I didn't think that out much.
No, I appreciate it. And I think that, for example, I spoke to a number of people who received the mailer about our new senior tax break, and they really, appreciated having that. And I think that if we can have a schedule and think about what are some of the sort of pieces of information that are most important for people to get, and prioritize them for a few mailers a year, I think that would help keep, I like, Amber, what you said about ways that the city, capital C city, is speaking back to constituents. I think that's a way that could have good impact, in addition to all of these other great things you're already doing.
Very thematic that we had the discussion about assessment tonight, because I think this is really, again, thank you, Chris, for putting this together, because this is the first and no-cost way to get a handle around what we're doing on communications. Don't have statistics on it, but there's a perception that our communications needs a lot of improvement amongst the community members. And this is a really important first step, is getting a sense on what we have, how we're approaching it, and thinking about compiling these resources as a background for whoever we might be able to bring on, or shift job descriptions to do this work. It's great to hear some of the background on the website. How, when it was, so it's completely self-managed or by, by the rec department, you said, how was it created though? I mean, is there ever an external resource that we bring to bear for the website, updating?
Well, we work with Dutchess County, which hosts it, so they have the platform, and then it's kind of you plug things in. So like each department has a page, and part of the challenge has been updating what's on it. We had a lot of old stuff on it that no longer made any sense, and then other things that weren't relevant. So we do maybe about twice a year ask the department heads to go through all of their pages and make sure they have the updated fee schedules. Look at your applications. Are they still relevant? Do they need to be updated? So we haven't done that comprehensively. Honestly, when I started, we were in the middle of the COVID and we had a ton of things, and this is an easy thing to leave at the end of the day. I'm always leaving something at the end of the day that's not done.
We all are. It's okay.
Yeah. So like I know that I'm remiss in getting an update out on Fishkill-Teller Avenue, and that bothers me. And again, if we had the resources of another person, that could certainly help. And I don't think that needs to be more than a few hours a week. I really think the model is like we do with the Climate Smart.
And that might be a really very wise investment of that portion of that budget that we have to do that. Yes, it is. There's always so much to do. Just getting towards the website too. They're probably, I'm assuming the county does a good job of making sure it's compliant with government, 508 requirements for handicap viewing and the like. But there is easy there's 10-step assessments that we can do. Even a volunteer could do it. But just to gauge the functionality of the website, just to make sure there's always improvements that can be made. Absolutely. But I think even on this basic 10-point checklist, it's really worthwhile putting this towards the top, and it's very inexpensive, if any cost, other than staff time.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been waiting for, because one of my long-term desires has been to get bill pay, both on the website and then, electronic billing as well as paying. And with the new water system, while they're inundated right now, the nice thing is that people will want to be able to provide an email so they can log in and use the system, and that may give us that opportunity to grow our base a lot more than what we do now. So we'll see. I don't know, but the finance folks are the ones who are choking on it right now, and they're not the ones that I ask. I just keep waiting and seeing. But that may help a lot in terms of getting us more than half our base electronic, right? Yep. We send out 5 things that I know of to almost everyone. We send out that assessment change, right? But that only goes to property owners. It doesn't go to everyone, right? Mm-hmm. And then we send out water bills for them a year, but again, it only goes to the property owner and not to everyone. So that's an interesting base which we might be able to use, but building an email base would be really nice.
Yeah.
So.
But again, for purposes of print, you can just do every resident.
Yeah, you can just do by household, right?
Mail house will just do that. You don't even put a name, just dear resident.
Chris, you were talking about including a section on housing on the website.
Yes.
Could you describe what you hope to have in that section?
Well, I think what I heard that we should at least have our laws about it. I mean, I think it would be a place where you would go where you could see that we have opted into the good cause eviction law and what that means, without having to read the law. I think it would mention some of the other things we do about inclusionary zoning, links for legal services of the Hudson Valley. Certainly our +1 ADU program, when that launches, hopefully shortly, there could be information about that on it.
So the other thing too is, remember, the county already has materials and web links and an emergency housing hotline. I traded emails with the commissioner who came and talked about that to us, and she and I were both on vacation. She returned on the 25th, I returned on the 26th, so there was a to-do on our end because a lot of it may just be linkages. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so
And then
let's see.
directing people, like I have phone calls where I'll direct people, I'll walk them through all of the affordable housing choices that are available and say, did you apply at West End Lofts? And did you do, put in for the Beacon Housing Authority? And we could have those contacts so they're all in one place. It's a little bit of time, but we'll get that up.
Yeah, thank you for taking on that project. I agree, that's a great idea.
And I do want to highlight that what I had proposed before wasn't a guide for new residents. I was saying it would be a guide because I'm sure every resident of Beacon, if they knew all the programs that we have currently, they'd know something was, they'd be like, wow, I never heard that we had this available at the transfer station,
Right.
or I never knew we
Right.
ran, pickleball classes.
Yeah.
Oh, and you guys are going to be psyched for the capital program. I mean, just tell you right now.
Chris, is there currently a connection between our City of Beacon website and the MyRec page, or are they two separate entities that currently exist, kind of exclusive of each
I
other?
think the latter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what I found too, even like searching for the plants that, that you could buy.
The backyard trees.
Yeah, it was like you couldn't find it on the main website by searching. And then I'm trying to dig and I couldn't find it, but I never thought of, recreation.
No, and that's an easy connection for us to make. I mean, as I was going through researching this, there were obvious things that was like, this is clunky, we're not doing this. Oh my gosh, that has to come off. That's 20 years old.
Yeah. I'm also on a consultant. I'm thinking of the work that Nick did when he was an intern with the HR department, and if that might be a way, it might still have to wait till our next budget and fiscal year, but a way to get some of this stuff that's like, we need someone to go through and assess this who has some capacity and acumen in that area to kind of get us that, the kind of the clearing out of things that might kind of, which I think is slightly different than the consultant. I think the consultant's more kind of the visionary and kind of help to do that, whereas someone who can actually do some of the stuff that may not be the best use of your and Ben's time.
Yeah,
They can guide the internal efforts too, the consultant.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost view it as like, one of the other things on my list is to improve wayfinding around the city. And we don't even see it anymore. Like, we're so used to it. I need somebody with fresh eyes sometimes to come in and just say, wow, you can't even get from here to there, unless you have your phone.
Right.
And I kind of need that for the website. Somebody who's fresh and saying, well, like you said, the MyRec you can't find there.
Yeah.
Yeah, before, Chris turned up, one of my first things was like, we're not having 3 different email systems, one for fire, one for police,
Yeah, we've come a long way on the email and the domain.
Right, and the issue, though, is that there isn't anyone sort of in charge and seeing the picture, right? And so we pick it up in pieces. And that's why this is a good discussion. I don't think, there's like some dramatic idea that will come out of this as much as, we'll need to get there, we'll need to put some resource against it. It will probably be a temporary one. It might turn into something that's like the model you describe, of climate action, which is X hours a month. As opposed to something full-time. And it might be someone who does it for someone else, right? I mean, that's how our website support gets done, is
It's
done.
a shared service.
Is a shared service.
Yeah.
This is different than the
absolutely.
support, right? This is the content component and the managing of the different departments to generate content that then can be centralized and, pushed out.
Yep.
It's better to not even, fresh eyes absolutely to our site, but experienced eyes, knowing what they're doing for other municipalities.
Both.
Just thinking about the emergency system, for example, it's fantastic. It's great that we have that for those signed up. It seems like maybe a third of the community, and maybe they don't need it. Maybe there's representation in every household. And I appreciate that we want to underutilize, you don't want to overburden people with messages, but there is a possibility with those systems where you can have an optional for not emergency messaging to receive on some regular basis about city events, other announcements. It seems like it may be a low cost. It's worth exploring. Add on to the
and
system.
we'll do periodic events. We did the Spirit of Beacon Day. If it's citywide, it's just we try not to do more than a couple a month because then people are like, "Jeez,
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for having like disparate, like, okay, I know that when I get a phone call from the city and they leave me a voicemail, I should actually listen to it
Yeah.
because it's probably something I need to know. If that were happening on
Quite.
something other than like really important stuff, I would start ignoring it and that would become noise. So I think there's something to be said for disparate channels for types of communication.
Like Mark thinks if he gets like a 10% open of his emails, it's an amazing return.
Yeah.
Because everybody's used to getting MailChimp and Constant Contact, and you're just like, oh, I'm done. It's background noise at a point.
Yeah, and that's why you need kind of multiple channels to
Yeah.
pick up people wherever they are at that moment. Okay.
Is part of the discussion tonight around how we're going to spend the $75,000?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Well, we
Or
can.
can it be allocated? some of
Well,
that?
is it part of the conversation, or should we, I mean, at some point, we have to prioritize all the needs and find out where best to spend that money.
Yeah, I think we are talking about that. I think we said that there could be some use of that funding for that part-time resource. That could be, a shared resource. I mean, that's what I was thinking when we were talking about that.
Well, if I recall, and help me out, because I think, Amber, you did the motion, it was 3 elements?
Yeah, it's certainly not $75,000 to spend on communications. Like, that's kind of wild. That would be incredibly excessive. Part of what we were looking at was the ability to start thinking about like mobility and access planning for the city, wayfinding, to your example, how to get people back and forth throughout the city without relying on personal vehicles so much. And then this communications component was the other piece of it. And at the time, in my head, I thought, like, yes, we probably do need a couple of hours of professional services from somebody to, get this thing rolling and start generating content and kind of compiling the information so that it wasn't a burden to the city.
Now the piece regarding, you used the term mobility, I tend to think about the problem in components, right, which is, a bike component of mobility, a pedestrian and sidewalk component of mobility. Those topics are professional studies typically. And those are also ones that we can get funded, right? Like we had asked, council had asked for this traffic study which would be citywide for getting the speed limit from 30 to 25. We took it to the county transportation, and we can get that done through them.
Yeah.
I think similarly, this area is if we do a little bit of work, we can do it at zero taxpayer cost, right? And I think we have to break it into parts, right? Because I think, and Chris, you have a view on this too, if we did a mobility study, it might be too many things to do all at once as opposed to breaking them into chunks.
I completely agree that it is too many things to do at once. And of course, like we don't want it to turn into this ballooning exercise. Again, there's a lot of opinions at the table. One of the things in my mind when we were talking about that was like, oh, well, the Fjord Trail, it would be really great if we had some way to make sure that people from the Fjord Trail were getting up to Main Street. It's a big hill and it's a little bit of a barrier. So did we want to think about having a bicycle stand or a little shuttle or something like that? There's a lot of components to it, and it is something that requires further discussion on, like, do we need to think about where there should be bike lanes or bike shares or, alternate means of transportation that people can access so they're not hopping in their car every time they need to get from one side of Main Street to the other. And the same thing for the communications. I think this was kind of a really good start of, okay, I think we've narrowed it down to like a couple of priorities that everybody agrees on, is kind of getting moving with more regular email, thinking about what that could turn into from a mailed perspective. And then also, yeah, it sounds like we probably do need a couple hours of professional services on a monthly basis to facilitate all of that.
Yeah. The interesting one, Chris, is I think we could get funding on those components of planning if we ask and take our time. But again, I'm looking to you as to what you think.
I would want to have a conversation with Natalie and see what capacity she has. I think to me, the lower hanging fruit is the sidewalk
Yeah, I
study.
agree.
Because you already have some mapping done,
Yep.
which I think the county has on GIS.
They do.
I think there would need to be evaluation of gaps. Before you even get to setting priorities, like your baseline existing conditions would include gaps, condition, ADA compliance, where you have things that have just collapsed and maybe you abandon it. Like we went with one good sidewalk on one block we did and got rid of the other one because we had 2 collapsed sidewalks. So you look at opportunities for just making it make sense. And then once you have those existing conditions, then the council should set the priorities based on criteria.
Yep.
And those probably are pretty easy, like you're close to a school, you're near Main Street, you're near other critical services, parks,
Yeah.
And
so-
that's also something where if you do have it organized and ready, there could be funding that comes up, just like
Well,
with West Center Street.
absolutely. Every year, we're kind of behind the 8 ball, figuring out the next length of I'm already having to figure out the sidewalk that we're going to do next year. We just were contacted today with a preliminary award on the sidewalk project we brought to you, which is Wolcott Avenue between South and the Beacon Housing Authority. And then again, I think Lee mentioned it, but we didn't really talk about it. We have a preliminary grant award for Beekman Street, and that includes a bike lane going on the uphill side. And that goes back to a conceptual study that was done by the Transportation Council in either 2018 or 2019. So I would love to have a document, where we can say, I'd like to know 2 things. One is, where are the priorities within the catchment area that CDBG funds, and then outside that catchment area? And then secondly, how much would it cost to catch up? Like you have sidewalks that were built in the 1960s and 70s that are functionally obsolete. And at what rate do we need to do that over a 20 or a 30-year period to actually get to a sidewalk system that's fully compliant and integrated, comprehensive? And I have people that call and they say, there's a gentleman who has a sidewalk that was built during urban renewal and that it has failed because it wasn't built to code, but I have no mechanism and he has to keep pouring money into it. I'd like to just look at areas of the city and say, we're going to do that area of the city and we're going to take care of ADA and we're going to get rid of the conflicts with the poles and
Yeah.
So I would just add, that's a very long run view.
No, it is a long run view.
Yeah.
No doubt. I mean, again, I'll take I'll take
Yeah.
the money I get this year and build the 600 feet I can build this year.
Yeah.
But
Well-
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would only say that we did this pretty systematically, and George has witnessed to our sewer infrastructure.
Well, you did it
Just-
to your roads. You and I had a conversation 30 years ago where you said, why don't we look at all the roads and see how much it would be to bond them, to fix them once and for all? And that number was so huge.
Yeah, that we said, let's
then
do
we
so much
said
a
we
year.
got to do this amount every year.
Yeah, and I don't think we picked that up for sidewalks, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I just wanted to appreciate that we are having this long view conversation. I think that is something that I've been hearing from the public they want to hear from us, knowing that this will take 30 years or even longer, but to know that the city is thinking about these things in those terms. And I think that this is a great conversation around sidewalks. I am also very interested in bike lanes and having a plan for bike lanes, and maybe to scope and ask if Natalie has capacity, is to have a memo or a working list of what all of those things are that we're interested in, and to start parsing them out over, the next several years of when they might actually be able to happen. But I am interested in looking at all of these different aspects of mobility, and making sure that the public also knows that we're thinking about it, even if we are taking incremental action.
Yep, and I've sat down with the chair of the Fishkill Avenue Committee and Natalie, and we sort of said, here's the target date to wrap it up. So, part of that was just, she has put a lot of time into it, and it breaks our budget. And I just want to kind of start to free that up so we can move ahead on other stuff.
Yeah, and in terms of budget, I don't know if Natalie has the time, but I think that spending some of this $75,000 on additional hours from Natalie for starting to scope even the conversation around a mobility plan, I think that would be a good use of that money if she even has the time.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay.
I mean, and the comprehensive plan is going to be coming up in the next year, 2 years, where that's going to start, so that's going to be interesting what they come up with. But also, I read in the Highland Courant that 2 area residents were awarded $100,000 for a bike sharing program, and one of the two is Thomas Wright, who is head of our city's Greenway Trail Committee. So it would be interesting to hear what moves forward with that project. It's connecting Beacon and Newburgh, but it is a bike sharing program.
Yep. So hear you. I think wrapping up the Fishkill Avenue one will give us some time. And the way I think about the comp plan is trying to do components of it ahead of time. So the Fishkill Avenue piece was sort of the one, okay, let's see if we can get most of that done, because very little of it was done in the last update or the original one. Mm-hmm. If we do a couple of pieces ahead of time, that makes the task when we get to it actually much more manageable.
And there's still things from the Main Street committee that we're implementing. I mean, we haven't finished all of the parking stalls. I do a few of them each year. We add on the side streets. And I just say, like, we do think ahead, and we also look back to what studies have been done, and when something becomes available, I may not have wanted to do that or had the bandwidth to do it. Like Beekman Street, we turned our attention right at that application, and we applied for $3 million out of a $3.8 million project. I wouldn't have done that project probably for another few years, but the funding availability put it to the front burner. And similarly with the CDBG, like I didn't know if we're going to get grants this year at all because of the federal government, but we'll line something up. I would like to come back, let me look into going back to the communication. I'd like to make some calls and find out what it might cost to have somebody help us out, what it might cost for a mailer, so that I'm just, not flying blind like I am right now. And I'll come back with a budget at some point for you guys.
Okay.
And then
That
maybe
sounds
we
good.
can move that money or assign that money out of the 75 to begin work on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'd like to suggest that for concrete steps, there are things that we can look externally, like you said. So maybe an external priority list that we could look at and comment on and contribute to. There's likely things that can be internally done. So it's part of that, maybe that same priority list. And in these priority lists, we're looking at gaps, where there's opportunities. When you look for gaps, you find that there's opportunities, some really nice alignments. And certainly there's corrections to be made. And so, I won't belabor everything here, but I did my own kind of cursory audit, and there's a number of things I think that need to be looked at, including with our emergency system, our assumptions around social media use and the like. But I'll save that for our list. But I think, again, concretely, it'd be good to have a priority list, and we can determine, do they belong externally or internally, and how do we approach it?
I would leave it to you to do the priority list. I mean,
Yep.
again, this is your setting of priorities.
And then the other one is that I do talk to Natalie with some regularity, and so the next chat will be how's it going on the committee, but let's start to tee up what else might be next. All right.
Great.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
For
and
now.
I think just when we have that conversation with Natalie, I am, as Pam mentioned, thinking about this ahead of the comprehensive plan and making sure that we have as much information as we want when we start looking at the next 10 years in Beacon. And I know, Lee, that you're saying that you're thinking about that, and like, for example, the Fishkill Avenue Committee is one of those pieces, and that work is moving forward. But I'd like to see if there are others that the rest of council is thinking about, and making sure that we're setting, that committee up for success when the time comes.
Okay. Other stuff? Are we good for the night?
I'll just say, in terms of priorities, I think this project of adding a housing page to the website is a pretty top priority for me. So I don't know, do with that feedback what you will, but I wanted to say that.
And the people that raised that's a legitimate point.
Yeah, and I think the easiest part is just providing linkages, to the county, because there's a bunch of information
Yeah, we
there.
don't need to repeat, but
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Our staff did ask me to remind people that you have until May 1st at the end of the day to call us and schedule your water meter upgrade appointment. We have nibbled away at the number of people, but there's still hundreds of people that have not made an appointment who have been billed $250 fine. I'm hoping they look at their bill over the next few days, but please go to our website, call that number, and call us and make that appointment, and then we will take that $250 fine off. That offer goes away at the end of the day on Thursday. So, and we've given,
Limited time offer.
it's a limited time. This is a good bargain. All right, thank you.
Do we need a motion to adjourn? So be it.
Yeah.
Have we mentioned what our next meeting is? Maybe we did already.
I did, and I said it's next Monday in this location at 7 p.m. It will be an official meeting, and I have a motion, and I will second the motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all. I've learned
Thank
that I
you.
can
Good
do
night.
that.
Have a good night.
Using your newfound power.